Welcome to the Decoding Innovation podcast series, brought to you by the EY Nottingham Spurk Innovation Hub, where we explore the innovative technologies, business models, and ideas that are shaping the future of industries. During each episode, we meet with stakeholders at the cutting edge to discuss innovations in their space, challenges they need to overcome, and their outlook on the future.
Welcome to the EY Nottingham Spurk Innovation Hub Decoding Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Brent Dersch. I'm joined today by Dan Drogman. He's the CEO and co-founder of Smart Spaces. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Brent. How you doing? Great to see you.
Good to see you again, too. Hey, let's get started here. Let's talk a little bit. First, just give us a little bit of introduction. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, certainly. So I started my career in software development during the dot-com boom. So this is the late 90s, early noughties. And I had aspirations of becoming a web designer. But that did come with a huge price tag on it. So because it was a dot-com boom, we thought I'd start my career on a huge salary. And sadly, mid studying at university, the dot-com crash happened. And I started on a far lower salary. But genuinely, I still pinched myself when I first landed my career in the industry, thinking I'm getting paid to do what I love. I genuinely used to sit there going, wow, I'm actually getting paid for this. And I don't know if that's because I worked in supermarkets throughout my university course. So I had, it didn't have to have much as a benchmark to beat, but certainly, I really enjoyed those formative years, albeit it wasn't with the brand new car on the driveway I aspired to early doors.
So, Dan, talk a little bit about what led you to found the company Smart Spaces. What led to the idea, how you went about starting it up.
Yeah, certainly. So around 2009, we were working for a company that worked in the commercial property sector, marketing a lot of the large office developments in London and across the UK. And at that point in time, a lot of the office landlords were looking to provide space to smaller companies, looking like startups and so on. And that required a much more stricter and tighter way to manage these spaces. So that meant if someone wanted to use a meeting room, rather than pay for that meeting room all month, they just paid for what they used. And so in 2009, we started to develop meeting room booking systems and billing systems for what was the serviced office sector, which becomes sort of the flex sector it is today. This is way before WeWork and big brands like that had really evolved. And so, around 2009, working for this commercial property company, that wasn't their core business. And so what we were doing was sort of seen to be a side gig. And one of the landlords we worked with said, look, I can see that you do the majority of the work alongside your brother, Tom, who actually only come in to cover maternity leave. So in my team, developing software for landlords, we had a gap for maternity leave, and my brother come in to help me. And what I would deem to be 2 weeks worth of work, he managed to complete in about a day. Almost made me look bad. And so, my younger, better looking, more intelligent brother joined us. And actually, that's when I first sort of formulated in my mind that, wow, we could have a company together. And actually, we were very fortunate that a landlord thought the same way as us and thought, hang on, we could be a tenant of our space and help write the software for our space. We were really fortunate to that client for doing that.
So tell us a little bit about the Smart Spaces platform. Like, who's it designed for? What are some of the key capabilities that you're offering?
Yeah, so at the time we were building these booking systems, we were also looking to do the same in the hospitality sector, which actually led to us winning a huge hotel chain, a global hotel chain booking platform. And so really that upskilled the team in the level of the quality of the code they had to write, but also the product. And most importantly, the product being multilingual, lots of different options for financing, but still predominantly browser-based. And we then went on to develop these systems for companies like big business parks, where you have a wealth of amenity on the park. But the thing that sort of fouled, and I must admit, we had a few failures in the years we've been in business, but the first big failure was when we built an intranet for a big business park here in the UK. And we poured our hearts and souls into this, and all of the knowledge we had acquired throughout our careers was deployed in this platform. And it had the booking system for the Hive, which was a common space that everyone on the park could use. It had the ability to audio online, not with an app, because the smartphone market was just starting. And so we built this out. Client paid us a nice amount of money to do this. And so we thought it deemed to be a successful project, only until a few months later when we met the client and they said, oh, can we have a look at the activity? And we're looking at the activity and we were so embarrassed. Literally, the only people on the system using the system were ourselves. And, the client was like, wow, that's disappointed. And I think what happened was we didn't manage to interrupt or get access to the workers' day-to-day experience within this business park. And so at that time, it was still easier for them just to go over to the restaurant, look at the menu, and order their lunch at the till. And so, we built a system. We had the booking system there. People would just email reception and say, can I come in? So an awful lot of human labour there, not so many efficiencies. And so wind the clock forward to around 2015, when one of our clients asked us to build the same product. We knew what we'd already failed on. Like, we knew what the problem was. It was making it a utility that people use every day. You have to use it at least twice a day. And so when we built the app for the business park, we knew we needed to have mission critical functionality that would allow us to advertise to these occupiers or tenants of the park the wealth of services were available, whilst making the user experience as like one-click purchase as possible, as frictionless as possible. And where we found that was in a number of places was ANPR for car park booking, so automatic number plate recognition, or LPR as it's called in other countries, combined with mobile access. Once we had those two pieces, where people use the app to use the parking, use the app to access the space, we then had 100% of the user base of the park. And so when we put a push notification out that you could get a discount if you ordered your lunch through the app and avoid queuing, we got record numbers of transactions. And so there we sort of thought, hang on, we've cracked it, and it's funny now today, it doesn't have to be mobile access or car parking, but we're always looking for that transactional feature that's a must-have that gives you that user base, which then allows you to sell additional services or provide additional services.
So Dan, help me think a little bit about the smart building space in the commercial world, maybe versus the smart home world, right? Because a lot of people are familiar with IoT, smart hubs, connected products within the home. How do you think differently about that as you transcend into the workplace? Like, what new capabilities does that bring? What new challenges does that bring?
Yeah, certainly. There's a lot of differences, but also quite a few similarities. And I think the biggest similarity we required to get a lot of traction was the fact that people would go, well, I can do this at home. Why can't I do it in the office? I mean, that was a great use case to have. But the core difference from a hardware technology perspective is the majority of home domestic market systems are DIY. You buy them online, you fit them yourself. They're a retrofit. They're rarely integral to the smart home unless you've built the smart home from scratch, which is sort of a different kind of managed system. So when you're working with offices, especially the scale of offices we work on, so we would see something from around 20,000 square feet upwards. And that would have systems that have been included or developed as part of the base build. And so that's going to be your IT infrastructure, so the internet connectivity to the building and the network that internet is connected to. You have the HVAC, so the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, which is typically in a 20,000 square foot upwards building connected to a building management system. You then have the lighting network, which would also be a smart lighting network if it's especially targeting a sustainability accreditation. And then you have the energy meters, and sometimes connected to the BMS, sometimes they're not. And then in addition to that, you've then got the other things, which is the till system where you order your coffee. You have a wealth of sensors available, and you have the access control, and if you have parking, the automatic number plate recognition. And so when we first started this journey, we started out on retrofit projects. So we were very much what we were capable of providing in terms of an end user experience was completely dependent on what the building already had. And so these early business parks that we worked on and headquarters buildings, we would go in and literally do a survey of every piece of equipment in the building, and then take that survey away and contact the manufacturers and work out what was integratable and what wasn't. And so, you get quite lucky. You'd find there's a BMS manufacturer that was well known, and we would say, they use BACnet, an open protocol that we can interface with. Brilliant. Others had Modbus. But when we started this journey, there wasn't very many that had secure protocols that could be exposed to the internet. So one of the first things we did was write those drivers that allowed us to connect to the insecure local services, secure them, encrypt them, and then provide them to a cloud service that then would be able to connect to a smartphone app. So there's a lot more investment in the commercial systems because they're obviously operating a larger scale asset. They're more managed, but they're not actually probably as cutting edge as what a lot of the DIY tech is. And so we really, the first investment in our technology was bringing these legacy systems up to date with the more contemporary modern systems, so we can have a like-for-like user experience. So if you can access your apartment with an app, you can control your temperature, you can control your lighting scene, you can set preferences and have it remember those preferences, or have a workflow where the garage light comes on when you switch the porch light on. We needed to actually do a lot of work on writing the drivers for the localized systems and exposing them to APIs to the cloud until we could achieve a similar user experience, which we're very proud to have today.
So how did you find it to be working with the companies that provided like some of the building management systems and some of the other infrastructure as a startup? Like, did they play nice? Did they take you seriously, or was it a challenge? What was that collaboration like?
Yeah, it was really challenging early on. As always in life, the smaller companies were the easier ones to work with, So the smaller lighting companies, which still had significant portfolios, but were still owner operated, they were great because they thought we were great. They had built a lot of the drivers already and were just so upset that no one ever used them. And I think that's something we've seen industry-wide, is that everyone had an API in, say, 2000 to 2015, but no one used the APIs, very rarely. And then now, actually, everyone uses the APIs. But these systems didn't even have APIs. Like I said, BACnet, Modbus, a whole host of languages which were open, which was the most important thing, but certainly not as managed or as easy to integrate as we get with MQTT and APIs today. But and so they didn't take us serious. And so what that meant was that we were actually usually pushed over to the integrator, so the company that fitted those systems. But they almost were really scared of us because they thought we were going to eat their lunch, like we were there to try and poach their business. And we were like, no, we could actually give you more business, because actually the more hardware you install and the more capability you provide us, the better end product we can provide to our end customer. And we don't do that. We don't have those services. We don't come to the building and install a BMS or install an ANPR system. We are just a software company. So, and so it took a little while. And like anything, we persevered. And one thing, because we'd come out of a commercial marketing company in the property sector, we were quite good at marketing. So the moment we got our first asset to market, we posted it on LinkedIn, we posted it on YouTube, we got PR in all the relevant press. These manufacturers went, wow, that's cool. And then when they went, hang on a minute, isn't that one of our buildings? And we're like, yep. They were like, you're not, you're creating a new market. you're not replacing or treading on toes in an existing market. And so they become way more open-minded to the point now where we're a strategic partner of all these major manufacturers globally, and we get invited to help guide where they make investment. And because we don't manufacture any hardware at Smart Spaces, they see us as a zero threat. And we've really pushed the industry forward, and we've managed to feed back. And I think the most important thing we've fed back is data on how their systems get used in the real world, and are they actually providing a suitable service. And so, that data is something they've not really had access to. And I liken it to like the car manufacturers now, where they know more about your driving style than you do. Finally, we've got the manufacturers in smart buildings, or the hardware manufacturers for building systems, to understand actually how does their system work in the real world.
So take me through a couple scenarios. Take me through a scenario of a smart workspace, a connected workspace that's done well. And then we're going to come back and I want to hear a horror story, a nightmare story about what happens when it goes wrong.
Perfect. Sounds great. Yeah. So look, a perfect day really in one of our buildings would be one where we can look at your forward calendar. We can suggest a desk to be booked on the days that your team are attending the building. You then have a mobile pass. If you decide to drive to work that day, your number plate is registered for the dates you've booked, so it's aligned to your desk booking. You don't need to go off and book a car parking space separately. Because you've arrived at the office, you're then credited, and this is a really cool thing we're seeing globally at the moment. You get credited a amount to spend for your lunch, which is a good way of helping get you back to the office, but also cover your costs for commuting. You then go into the building, but you don't even need to take your phone from your pocket. So we can use ultra wideband technology to understand that you have a credential on your being, and we can look at the CCTV to understand you are that person. And then you can go from street to seat without having to go for a turnstile or present to a reader. The lift is called to your home floor. You can edit that, but we know which floor you've got because you've put the desk. And then you have the ability to meet your colleagues. You've now got a signal that says that you're in the office, so people aren't going to have a wasted journey to come find you. And you can do the same and find your colleagues. The other thing we can do, which is really nice, which has been very popular, is a lot of our clients have decided to put circadian rhythm lighting systems in, but you can have it set to your preference. And what we've seen across the preferences in our app is that everyone tends to go to the warmer shades. And when you booked your desk, you would have the ability to choose which area you want to work in. Do you want to be in the noisy area? Do you want to be in a cool, quiet area, or do you want to be in a warm, quiet area? And you can choose on the floor plate, and we can run these zones, and you can choose. It's not much variance, but it's enough to help you, be more comfortable in the workplace. We can then also have the ability to book your gym class whilst you're on site. And then as it comes towards the end of the day, we can notify you if you need to leave early based on traffic or public transport interruptions. Once you leave the building, that space will be shut down. So we can also warn if you try to create a future booking on, say, a Friday. If there's not enough critical mass, we can push you to another space within the building because that space will be disabled. So you've got an element of personalisation, an element of frictionless there, and also making sure that journey is not wasted. Your colleagues are there the day you're going in, so you're not making a journey in and think, actually, I could have achieved more working from home. And throughout all of that, you've been advertising the great facilities and amenities that are available in the office that you might not necessarily have at home. You've got the fitness, you've got the cafe, you've got an events calendar. And so they're key in drawing people back to the office. And the office needs to be a place people want to go, not have to go.
So I love it. Now take me through what happens when it goes wrong, and not necessarily like your platform, your technology, but I'm sure you've seen real estate managers, building managers try to implement, kind of smart building technology. Where have you seen it go really sideways?
Oh, certainly. So I think that the biggest problem is the siloed systems. So for you to be able to do what I just described, you're logging in to 5 different systems. You've got your access control system or your visitor management system. You've got your desk meeting reservation system. Typically, they could be 2 different systems. The catering system is a different app as well. You've got to remember your password for all these systems, and that means a lot of password resets to start with. And then with the car parking system, it just starts to become inconvenient when you're driving into the car park, you haven't got close enough to the barrier, so you're having to get out of your car, go up to the reader with your plastic card. You realise you haven't got the right plastic card. You go back to your car, find your wallet, get the card out, authenticate. You then get to your office and you think, oh, at least I've got the card to get me in the car park. Oh no, that's a landlord card. I now need my occupier's card. So you're now fumbling around for another card. You can't find that card. And so you then have to go to the security office to request a temporary pass, which is a sign-out process. You're now late for your first meeting. You arrive to your desk, which someone's already sitting in, because there's not a sensor to release that or to notify you that desk is occupied. So you then have to go and find another space, only to find out when you start working that none of your colleagues are in that day anyway. You haven't been allocated your discount for the restaurant, so you're just paying out of your own pocket, and you're not getting the loyalty for that because you forgot the coffee card with the stamps on it, because that's not in your digital pass. There's no ability to personalise. The lights are what they are, and some designers have chose that really stark. In the UK, we call it kebab shop lighting, and it's that really stark white light. It looks almost clinical. It's like a forensic scene.
It's like the 6,000K light that burns out your retinas. Yeah.
You've got no method of tuning that or changing that. And you're also working in a really warm, noisy, stuffy space because you didn't get an option of spaces to work in. The building doesn't shut down when you leave. It shuts down when the master time clock goes at 8 p.m. So you're wasting energy after the last person walks out. And you find that actually when you go in Friday, the whole building's heating one entire floor just to cater for you working in the space that day. So that's like a worst case, which there's a lot of buildings out there, many a building that we've come across before we've implemented our platform. We've been like, wow, that's a lot of work. And where we find this so powerful is almost like businesses the scale of EY. The more employees you have, the bigger problems we solve because the more time we solve. That queuing up at a security office to get your badge printed, if you're onboarding a new location or you're moving offices, that's a lot of man hours for the security team to process that card, give you that card. And when you're working hybrid patterns, you lose that card quite often and always need to have it on you. And, we all know we have our phones with us all the time. We don't necessarily have a plastic card or a wallet. And so just that alone can save large businesses an awful lot of admin. And I think it also helps from a cybersecurity perspective where you're managing personnel. When I create your email account, it also creates your physical access and your access to all the resources. And as I change the locations you work in, the access to those locations also get provided dynamically. It's very scalable and very efficient, and I think that's the key. But at the same time, it adds the personal touch, so people feel cared about.
So, Dan, how did you get started bringing some of your first clients and customers into the fold, right? You're working with large companies. You're in startup mode. How did you start to make those connections and build some of those relationships?
Yeah, certainly. I think, look, one of the great things about technology is the technology industry has been great at persuading every businesses they need it. Even though there's been so many terrible technology rollouts and software applications, especially ones run by governments and so on. I mean, me and my brother used to wonder how so much money got wasted on some of these systems that never even made it into the hands of the users. But despite all of that, because of the rise of the internet, because of the companies that had successful digital transformation, I think every business knew that they should be experimenting with tech. And I think Smart Spaces got very fortunate to have clients that were willing to take risks, were early adopters. And I think when we look back at our track record, and look, originally we were working for the landlord. Today, most of our customers are enterprise businesses. And actually we still work for landlord, but because of the nature of the enterprise business and the scale and the multi-locations, that is a huge growth area for us. But these landlords back in 2015, if we look back at the schemes that we worked on, they were incredibly successful schemes without our technology because that development manager was willing to take risks and push the boundaries. He didn't just go for the same carpet tiles as the building next door. He invested in things like solar PV, even though he didn't have the sustainability legislation there at the time. He was forward thinking. They invested in things like a cinema in the park to be able to, host events. They invested in foosball tables in reception, and they started to break the mold. And one of those things they broke was the tech mold, and that was very fortunate for us. So then it was all on our shoulders to actually deliver something that actually got used. And it's coming back to that story from earlier, which is that product market fit. We'd already failed massively, and so we went in with our eyes open, and we were very, very conscious that on that first meeting after we went live, that the analytics showed some really meaningful data and engagement that covered our bill. And actually what happened was we ended up rolling out across the portfolio of these businesses, these landlords, because they went, wow, it works. But it wasn't easy, I promise you. And so certainly, we're very fortunate that we had the early adopters. And then in the property sector, people do learn from each other. And once you'd proven it for a few of the early adopters, the others came. And so now there's not many buildings we know of in the European market or US market coming to market that aren't a smart building.
So we've talked a little bit about IoT. We've talked a little bit about wireless connectivity, Bluetooth. How about AI? How are you thinking about AI in terms of how it interacts with your platform and what capabilities it could provide for your customers?
Yeah, so there's a couple of sides to that. So the first thing we've been doing for quite some time now is having AI as part of our development practices. So this is analysing our code, looking for security vulnerabilities. Every single line of code still goes for a human code review before it gets published or deployed. But so we've been utilising that and utilising a number of the different online platforms to assist us with formulas for scaling different resolutions of different devices, and that's really helped give our team a lot more productivity when it comes to developing these integrations with APIs and testing and so on. From a product perspective, the biggest thing is that we connect to every single aspect of the building. We are access control, lighting control, HVAC, BMS, energy, lights, EV chargers, tills, blockers, showers, everything. We connect every single thing back to our cloud, and then that facilitates what you can do in the app, what you can do in our rules engine, what you can do in our analytics. Now, the biggest problem with that is the amount of records we store in our database. We store petabytes of data on an asset. And that is truly, I know there's a lot of cheesy terms that get banded, but it is an unrefined oil to a certain extent. And where we've had the most luck with ML and now using LLMs to write really natural language queries, so literally comparing weather to our cycle amenity space and how that's being used, public holidays versus what we're ordering food, energy patterns versus booking patterns. And so we've developed our new analytics package using an LLM because our support team previously were bogged down with report requests. And we literally thought that client A, client B, they're both in the finance sector. They both have a 400,000 square foot headquarters, and they both have all the same systems connected to our cloud. Their occupancy and productivity reports will be the same. Nope, that's not how we do business. Nope, that's not how we do business. And we were just finding that it was really consuming such a resource for our team to go off and create these bespoke reports. Our investment is giving our tenants the ability to create these reports themselves. And that's been the biggest impact we've had to date. And then we're breathing life into some of our older systems. So we had a robot at one of our developments called Heidi. And Heidi was a robot designed to cover reception when the reception team wasn't there. And we had this hooked up to a speech to text system, but the whole library of conversation was something that we had created at Smart Spaces. So it didn't take very long for you to exhaust those queries, and then the robot just come up with a load of things. Sorry, I don't know those. Sorry, I have to refer you to reception. And, after building the query system and LLMs being part of our everyday, the robot, which has been in our warehouse, we thought, hang on a minute, we can breathe a new lease of life into this robot. And this robot can have access to the wealth of information available to all LLMs now. Speech to text has become far, far better and far more accurate. And so we're bringing that robot back, but in a different light for training purposes. Yeah, but I do see, you could probably have quite a good conversation in a reception whilst you're waiting for the person to come collect you. So, yeah, I'm really excited with what we're doing with AI at Smart Spaces.
So if you think about all of the systems that you're integrating, that you're connecting the dots, is it fair to think that you're creating, effectively a digital twin of a building, or how would you think about what you're creating versus the world of digital twins?
That's brilliant. Yeah, so I think, yes. So at the foundations, it's an operating system. So it's a way to operate your asset efficiently and improve how you operate your asset. And a huge piece of that is your digital twin. The app is a huge piece, and we foresee that the app might change medium in the future. It could be a wearable, it could be an implant, it could be, a whole host of different interfaces. But at the moment, the app is the best interface. And the digital twin is the best way to simulate. The best thing about a digital twin is that you don't make these changes in real life. You can test them before you inflict them on your user base. And where we've found that incredibly powerful is strategies around heat and cooling, but also strategies around lifts. That's where you can really upset a lot of tenants through some small changes. And we record all those dwell times, waiting times in our app. And we can understand what impact you're going to have if you make changes.
Thinking a little bit about all the partnerships you've had to put, to get into place with everything from, lift manufacturers to HVAC manufacturers, like how do you manage all of those partnerships and those relationships, right? Knowing that, as all of those companies are kind of evolving their offerings, what capabilities and what data they may have available. It feels like it could get overwhelming for a team very quickly. So how do you keep track of all that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it is forging a partnership, a long-term partnership. One thing we certainly want to enforce quite early on is don't have breaking changes in your API, and don't force people to migrate straight away. And so we've gone through all that pain of, migrating from V1 API to V2, and V2 is still a beta and it's not been as reliable. And you've got to bear in mind, actually, we are the last interface until the customer. So they don't blame the lift manufacturer, they blame Smart Spaces. And so we actually do the first line support globally and follow the sum model for all of our deployments. And so we learn very quickly what's not working and what is. There's been some manufacturers we've worked with that it's been hell. And we don't recommend them. If we get asked what is your dream building in terms of the hardware, they don't get recommended because we get too many support tickets. It doesn't provide a satisfactory user experience. And so the ones that do and the ones that we forge long-term partnerships, it just gets stronger and stronger.
The team you've got today, you've got a relatively lean team. How do you think about the talent that you're bringing into the Smart Spaces team right now?
Referral. Like some of the best hires we've ever made are referral. We have really stringent tests for the software developers. And I'd say our success has been hiring the software team.
How do you think about geographic expansion, like both from a business offering standpoint as well as a team footprint standpoint?
Yeah, certainly. So the great thing is we use partners to deploy our solution locally. We have commissioning engineers that can assist those clients if they're finding, or those integration partners if they're having difficulty. So that really helps us scale globally because we don't need to be there physically. We run the 24/7 follow the sun support model. So all of our clients get the luxury of 365, 24 hours a day support. And then we've had local sales teams. So we have local sales executives that work in the regions to sell our solution to channel partners or direct to client, depending, how they operate. And interestingly, we've decided to keep our software team onshore here in the UK. We let our team remote work for like holidays and things like that, but predominantly the majority of the year they're based here in the UK, which is expensive compared to some of our counterparts that have decided to outsource that. But coming back to your previous question on how do we manage these integrations, how do we have the code quality, the product market fit, it's because we've got this tight-knit team, and we'll continue to expand that. And we're still predominantly headcount is still mostly engineers. And then where we've been really fortunate, and I think this has been for some of our competitors as well, is that you get a really good enterprise client and they take you globally. And they help you expand globally because they've got one office in their portfolio that has the best user experience, and they want that consistent around the world, and that's helped get us into over 26 countries now, and so that's been fantastic, and sort of helped finance that as well.
Now, as you've evolved over the years, have you? What's been your approach to raising funding, or how have you essentially found the capital to grow the business?
Yeah, certainly, it's a good question. So when we started out in 2010, we started out with like very little seed capital from our dad, actually. So our dad gave us 20k sterling, and we made some terrible decisions. Like we bought a really expensive printer that we didn't really need. That probably wiped out about 2 or 3k of the 20k. We didn't pay ourselves, actually. We didn't pay ourselves for a long time. We lived off our savings. I think we had to contribute towards the rates and service charge for the office we was in. And I think actually it went towards our first software developer employee. I think a good chunk of that went towards that first employee. And so, by the end of year one, we would run out of savings. We'd burnt through the 20k. We needed to turn a profit quickly. And so all three employees being coders, we could take the brief, build it and get paid for it. And so that was really powerful. There wasn't really any wasted costs. And we did have a nice office, but like we said, we were countering a lot of that cost through developing the software for that client. And that landlord was very generous and introduced us to all of his customers. So he's the other tenants, the office next door. And it was incredibly embarrassing. It was like your dad wheeling you out in front of your friends to try and sell you a service, or can I wash your car or something like that. And these people would be running their businesses and they'd be like, well, we don't need a software platform. We're fine running our sales academy or our insurance company. But funny enough, after the 20th person he introduced it to, a couple went, yeah, no, we need solutions. And actually, important note to make, in 2010, we were building these solutions completely from scratch code base. Smart Spaces now, 100 million square feet in over 26 countries, is all on the same source code. It's one platform globally. You can host it yourself in your own cloud, but the source code is one platform, and we all contribute to that.
So Dan, thinking ahead, what do you see as next on the radar for Smart Spaces?
I think probably an expansion into other areas of real estate, and that's already something that we've got in the pipeline. So there's a number of projects that are going to come to market that are mixed use. So they'll have a residential angle, a hotel angle, and a commercial angle, plus a leisure aspect as well. So that's really exciting. And I think that's the future of real estate, because we can't continue to build buildings that only get a function part time. You're either out of the office and your home's not being used, or you're in the office and you're not in the office at weekends and the office is vacant. And I think these mixed use schemes are the future in terms of efficiency in cities. And so that's really exciting. So huge announcements coming out there in the future. And then I think the residential sector looks interesting to us, especially BTR, where we've all got a number of projects underway where actually the tech stack is very similar to offices, because rather than have demised IoT systems or demised boilers and heating and cooling, it's a central system. And that's what our system was developed from the outset to manage. And you get some bad behaviour when you have an apartment that it's a one cost, so you just rent that apartment for $5,000 per month or $2,000 per month, and it's one bill. What's incentivizing that person, other than they're conscious, not to leave the windows open and the heating on or the air conditioning on? And we can easily analyze that behavior, override systems, or even incentivize to change behavior. And that's eroding the margin for a lot of these BTR companies. So that's an exciting space for us, alongside the mixed use. So that's next, really. And listening to our customers, a lot of the features we've built on our platform have been by listening to the customer. You can't always build everything they want. If we'd done that, we certainly would be in trouble. And there's certainly a thing that don't ask the customer what they want, from Henry Ford, because they're not always right, but they certainly, especially when they're the ones managing a particular process that you're automating, that's where I think, you can really lean on them. So someone who manages corporate client suites globally, you should be listening to that person to understand, so this software just did that for you. That would save you this amount of time. Yes. And this would make the users use that instead of pestering you with an email. Yes. Listen to that. That's gold. So many companies we're the masters. They go into property companies and they tell their property company how they should be running their property, which never goes down very well.
So, Dan, this has been a fascinating discussion. What I'd like to do is close it out. You've created a phenomenal platform here, and you've been successful from a business standpoint. What advice would you give to founders who are starting out in the early stages of their journeys, like based on what you've learned and experienced in your career?
Yeah, so look, the interesting thing is I've worked on companies, because some of the companies we were involved with writing the software, they were funded businesses, so they had raised VC or PE, and they were highly stressful environments. And we were we're a contractor basically serving that entity, writing software, writing code. And we just felt it was so stressful. And when we'd go to a meeting with one of these companies versus a company that was, a profitable enterprise, the atmosphere was just so much more relaxed. The meetings were more, just a different animal, different experience. And so that sort of scared us out of the funding to a certain extent. But obviously there's so many success stories. So learning on what we've experienced, if you're really truly passionate about what you do, if you don't want to be an overnight success, we all want to be overnight successes, but if you're patient and you just want to get out of bed in the morning with a smile on your face and work with great colleagues to create a great product that you truly believe in, and you're a very useful, skilled individual, do it slowly but beware that you've got to do a lot yourselves. You've got to roll up your sleeves. At the same time we were writing these coding solutions in 2010 with our first employee, we was also doing the invoicing, we was also doing the marketing, the cleaning, everything. Between the three of us, we even were once we built a booking system for a restaurant, and to make some extra revenue, we printed the menus for the restaurant. And my software developer looked at me going, "You didn't tell me this when you just hired me, that I'd be printing menus for a restaurant." I'm actually just listening to his feedback. We said no to that again, because we very much nearly lost him as our first employee because of this menu printing episode. And actually it turned out we laminated them wrong. And so they had the contents of most people's meals inside the menus the next time we went to the restaurant. And so we learned that we shouldn't be printing menus anyway, but we were quite entrepreneurial in terms of we knew we needed pounds and pence to cover the bill. So we were quite open-minded. And I think we were very accommodating. We were yes men. We said yes to a lot of things. We say probably no a little bit more, but that culture hasn't changed enormously. When someone comes to us with an idea, if we think it makes sense, we'll go for it.
Fantastic. Well, Dan, this has been a great discussion. I've just loved the stories. I loved hearing about your experience firsthand. Would like to thank you for being on the podcast today, and wish you all the best in your future endeavors at SmartSpace.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brent. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.
The Decoding Innovation podcast series is a limited production of the EY Nottingham Spurk Innovation Hub based in Cleveland, Ohio. For more information, visit our website at ey.com/decodinginnovation. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to spread the word.